The house that burned on Crest, where you can still see the stairs?
That was Mr. Furch's house. Wasn't he a teacher?
He was in the Gary.
He was in the
adult education business school. Gary
Yes.
Business School.
And where was William Wirt's house?
William Wirt's house was over on East Road. The very first house that's up high on the dune over there. I don't know who has that property now, but that's where it was.
The East End?
East End, yes. As the ridge comes around before it drops off to the lake, that's where Mr. Wirt's house was.
Was Washburn's house?
So that was just north of that one.
North of that.
That house was originally.
Oh, the Strausses have that property and have a house there now, I believe.
That was originally the Marhaver family that built that log house.
Oh.
That's still there. The second one from the end of that ridge.
Oh, that's Kermit Meyer's house now.
Okay. That was built before the Depression.
When was Edner's house?
Well, the Edner's house, which was over here on near the original Snyder house, was a log house, and it was built in that era as well.
Is that the Beauchamp house,
yes,
now
that
Snyder
was the
house?
Beauchamp house later, correct. Again, I don't know who the present owners are.
Well, Snyder's own it now, and they rent it.
I see. Okay, well, anyway, that was Mr. Ittner was the architect of most of the Gary schools. He was a school architect and did architecture for schools all over the country. That's that little bit of lore on some of the early folks.
Uh-oh. We are now down at the guest house. On the main floor, it's now the waterworks. And Henry and Arthur will tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, dealing with the waterworks, the south end of this structure is a 40,000-gallon reinforced concrete water storage tank, which was originally built as the primary storage tank for the water utility system for the entire town. The pump house was located down at the bottom of the blowout down here, and it pumped water up to the storage tank, which then was distributed through the rest of the town through water meters. And that was constructed in the late 1920s. The guest house, which was built as part of the entire structure here, was on the floor above the water tank, and it was 2 stories high. So the structure itself was a 3-story structure. The lower part of it to the north of the water tank was a 4-car garage. It was there for the purpose of guests to park their cars in while they were staying at the guest house. The purpose of the guest house was a twofold purpose. One, to serve as a place for prospective owners of real estate to come and have a chance to look at the town in a somewhat relaxed fashion, and also to serve as a place for overflow guests of the residents of the town to take care of people they couldn't house in their own property. Pass on any more?
They did have living quarters for the operators,
Guest house.
and these 2 back rooms back there.
Like behind the garage part.
And, the guest house was heated. It had radiators, steam heat throughout. Large boiler, coal-fired boiler.
How many rooms?
It had 6 on each floor. 6 on each floor, so there were a total of 12 guest rooms.
12 guest rooms.
They each had their own private bath, which in those days was an innovation, being that we were just coming out of the outhouse era. All the rooms were very similar, and they were all furnished with rustic furniture that, as I recall, came from the prisons.
It all came from Michigan City. Prison shop, Michigan City prison.
Huh. Was it any of the wicker chairs that are up in the clubhouse?
Yes, that's what the style of it all was, as well as the dressers.
You know, we have a dresser now, and I guess you recognized it. Up at the clubhouse?
Yes. It's one of the originals. And the clubhouse operated on the American plan, and they served meals along with for all the guests that stayed in the guest house. And it operated primarily only during the summer months. I don't recall that it was a year-round operation.
And what about the balcony up here?
There was a balcony at the end of each of the
Center hallway on both levels of second floor and the upper floor.
Would have been right here, right where you're standing, right above up there.
Right above where we're standing, yes.
And then you said posts supported it up.
Supported by posts, yeah.
Posts that went up and supported that.
It was as large as this pad is here, as far as how far it came out.
Okay. This is the area on the north side of the structure where the balcony stood. This is the waterworks now, and right above it is where the guest house was, and Henry and Arthur will be walking up the original stairs from the parking garage for the guests, and we'll walk on up to the clubhouse. Now, Mr. Studebaker also had a cement plant where this cement that we're walking on was made right here in Dune Acres at the plant. And Henry's father also did supervise the building of the guest house. At this time, we do not know who built the clubhouse. In 1991, the new windows were put into the clubhouse. The money was raised by the foundation, the Dune Acres Civic Improvement Foundation. Each window was contributed by an individual, and the windows are marked with a plaque with their name on it. We will now go down at the site of the old cement plant, and Henry and Arthur will tell us about their school days here.
This is the site of where our father built a concrete block manufacturing plant in the late 1930s, around about 1937,
About 36, 37, I believe.
Prior to that, the concrete blocks had been made a few hundred yards over here on a hand machine, and this was a mechanized operation. He went up to Holland, Michigan, and bought the machine up there, and they brought it down here and set it up in here along with the concrete mixers it took to mix the concrete with machinery rather than by hand, which had been done previously. And the concrete block machine could make 2 blocks a minute. Initially, all of the aggregate that was used in the blocks was hauled off of the beach down in front of the town. And they had a tractor and a trailer. They'd go down there and scoop up the gravel, bring it back up here, and didn't we shovel that all through screens? Screen the big stones out of it?
Screen.
And
They made the finest blocks.
they made very tough blocks. Nice looking blocks, but that wasn't too practical sometimes, and that was very manpower intensive. So in the early 1940s, we started using limestone from the Thornton Quarry to make the concrete blocks. And we spent many, many hours driving back and forth to Thornton, hauling aggregate out here, 5 tons at a time, in our old Ford dump truck, and dumping it back over here, and then we wheeled it all into the hoppers and put it up into the mixers, and then mixed it up and conveyed it over to the concrete block machine, where again the machine tamped out 2 blocks a minute, and they were hand lifted off of the machine onto curing racks, and each curing rack would hold how many blocks? About 40 blocks.
40 blocks per rack.
And when that rack got full, we had a hand truck that would pick that rack up, and we'd stack them in the back of the concrete block plant in rows until they hardened up. enough that they'd stand the weather. Then we'd push them all outside on a walkway that went around over here, and we had a large area of pavement over there that we'd just set them down in, and then we'd water them to help cure the concrete. And the water came out of the well right over here.
Well,
And that went on from the late 30s up through World War II. And I guess the last year that we really made concrete blocks was, what, 1947? Yeah.
Fort Burton, too.
Yeah, well, and in the March of 1949, there was a big fire started out here on US 12 alongside of just south of the railroad tracks, and a March wind blew that fire right through to Dune Acres here, and burned this whole block plant down to the ground and everything that was in it, along with one of the houses over here on Crest Drive.
Albert Purchase House.
Yeah, Mr. Albert Purchase House burned to the ground in that fire. And it burned all the way to the lake down in front of Crest Drive. And burned quite a ways through the town and other areas, but they were able to save all the other homes from that fire. And that was kind of where it all ended up after that. We spent about a year hauling the junk out of here, and all that's left is what you see, the slabs.
And what was the size of the slab here?
The slab that the block plant itself stood on was about 40 feet square. And this was originally a depression through here, but they hauled lake sand in here and filled it in and leveled it off so that it had a nice level floor in it.
And you're standing at the north
We're standing at the
east corner.
corner of what was constructed. So it went 40 feet in that direction and 40 feet in that direction and squared off all the way around. And it had this concrete walkway that went around over to where the rack stood, and it came in through the back door too, so it made a full circuit all the way around into the concrete block.
Into the side.
Yes, to the side. And the aggregate was dumped in piles in the back, and the cement bags came in freight cars on the South Shore siding down here, and
Carload at a time.
carload at a time, 50 ton. That would be about 200 bags. And that would be a good after-school job to unload that freight car. Those bags weighed 94 pounds apiece, and we'd load those onto the 1.5-ton truck and haul them in here, load at a time, and stack them in piles in the back of the concrete block plant so that they could be used to make the blocks.
And then every day after school you would come over here
Every
and...
day after school, we'd come over here, and the three of us, Arthur, myself, and our father, would, in an evening's time, we could make a couple hundred blocks. And in a full day with a full crew here, we could make 1,000 blocks. 120 blocks an hour in an 8-hour day was 1,000 blocks.
And they went into building the houses in Dune Acres.
They went into building the houses in Dune Acres, and they also, all over the county and several schools were built with those concrete blocks.
Oh.
Hebron School was made with those
Clouts. And the auto dealerships in Valparaiso, many of them were built.
And a whole subdivision over in Michigan City has all the basements were built with blocks from this concrete.
Some of the Chesterton buildings, the Wilbar Manufacturing.
Yes, and the bowling alley.
Oh.
Bowling alley and
Costa's building.
yes,
Apartment building.
Sadler's apartment buildings, where the old skating rink was.
Oh,
Those
sure.
were all our concrete blocks, and a lot of the farmers used them to build granaries with because you couldn't get building material easily during the war.
So this, you really started in the 30s. This was built around...
Built in the late 30s, 1937.
So 10 years.
About 10 years it ran, yes.
And what
Of
about...
course,
Go
this
ahead.
property is outside the corporate limits of the town, at least at that time it was. This property was owned by town residents. Crumpackers owned the town, and our father had a verbal lease with it. We didn't have any paperwork on this at all.
I believe this is part of the national park now.
It is now. This is now part of the national park, yes.
Want to tell about the sorghum?
Yes, our father had a great taste for sorghum, and he grew it in the field right back here. And he had a sorghum press, and we pressed it out. And over there you can see the remains of the cooker, the evaporator that was used to evaporate sorghum. And he made sorghum molasses. Just a little thing to do on the side.
Okay.
Yeah, one of our other after-school activities was to deliver blocks. And Saturdays sometimes.
Do you have a truck?
Well, we had the same truck that hauled the aggregate was used to haul the blocks, which made the pile very high on the truck.
Yeah, it was a dump truck, and it wasn't really suited well.
It wasn't designed, so you had to lift the block quite high to get it in the truck, and then to get a full load, the block pile was quite high on the truck.
No mechanical advantages?
None at all. None. It was all done by hand. The block,
One at a time.
The blocks weighed about 45 pounds apiece, and we could get 250 on a load. 250. Yeah. Then the truck was well loaded. It was all they could do to haul 250 blocks at a time. So if you figure that out, that's about 10,000 pounds, and that's 5 tons.
Well, we'll see if we can find the railroad tracks.
We'll tell you about the tracks.
Okay, what is this?
The roofing asphalt that was melted and heated and put on with on the hot roof process, or tar roof.
Yes, it came in steel drums.
The drum is still over there.
I don't know if that was an asphalt drum. Yeah. But that's what it was for. That's 6 inch?
6-inch block, right. And it was a gravel block, too.
That's one of the blocks.
Yeah.
Survivor.
That one was made with red gravel.
Yeah, we could make all sizes. We made 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, and rock face and smooth face, and some very fancy
Stucco face, white cement face.
white cement. Different.
And you think that old drum is...
I don't think that's just a leftover. Is it open-ended or closed?
She's closed on both ends.
No. It's just a 50.
That's a fireplace.
Oh,
Damper.
part of a fireplace.
Fireplace damper. Yeah.
This is called a fish plate, and the other rail would be drilled just like this one, and then you meet together, and you put bolts in, and you could fasten it together. And then they had metal cross ties that put the rails with the right distance.
I'll try to get a close-up, Henry. Okay.
Oh, there's another one over there. They were always just like in a railroad, 2 of them side by side. And they had about a 30-inch gauge, as I recall. To make concrete, they'd send stone up on it. Concrete, and make tracks up the side of a hill to a home construction site from the nearest roadway, so the materials could be transported to the building site. The tracks were supported on posts and bents, and there was a pulley system used to attach the car to a cable which went through pulleys to a truck, and the truck would go down the road and pull the car to the top of the hill so that it could be unloaded, and then it would just go back down to the bottom of the hill and be loaded up again. And all types of building materials were hauled on it: lumber, cement, stone and aggregate for making concrete and mortar, stone for construction of walls, flagstones and all that type of material. And that's about the story on the cars and the tracks on the hillside.
Well, Henry, I'd like to thank you very much for all this information. Arthur, I'd like to thank you. And Barbara Plampin, who discovered these railroad tracks
You're welcome.
in her backyard. Thank you all very much. We're on East Road between Crest and Lupin at the Powers house. Okay. All right, this is East Road.
The horse pasture was just up in there.
Okay, Arthur, say that again.
Yeah, up in the north part of this valley here was the horse pasture for the horses that were used with the slips and Fresnos to excavate and make cuts through the heavier dunes that required leveling to build the roads. And then over in this direction was the Dune Acres Incorporated shop, which was a rather long, narrow building that's just along the edge of East Road. Is that what we call it?
Yeah.
East Road. And
The original cement plant?
the original cement plant was a little 12 by 12 cement pad over in this depression here. And all the blocks made there were made with beach gravel. They were very heavy blocks, 55-pound, two-hole cement blocks that made one at a time. I think his capacity was about 50 or 60 a day, the most.
Sounds about right.
And when they outgrew this, that's when you built the other plant? These pictures are taken by Henry and Arthur Studebakers' family from the Clubhouse in 1949, right after the big fire swept through from the railroad tracks through the cement plant, and we're looking at Crest Drive. The bare sand dune is where the Butch's house burned down. Jack Kramer's house is in the center of the picture. The Lesh house is the red one on the lake. Andre Leduc is the white house on the left. And Laura. And the house on the far right is the Dyerly house, which burned down in the 60s, I believe, or 70s. This is just a little bit to the right. They took about 5 pictures trying to do a panorama showing the fire damage in 1949. Now Jack Kramer's house is on the left. You see Crest Drive going in front of the Dyerly house with the red roof. Bear Dune where the house burned down. And you see Martha Hall's house up there on the right, the red one. Just below it, the Domke house, and to the right of that, now Silverman's, and then the Louise Lutz house. We're seeing a little bit further to the right. The next white house is Mary Millar's house. It now belongs to the Baumbergers. There's a small white dot to the left of it with a green roof. That's Margaret Doyle's house, built in 1937 by the Studebakers. You can also see there are no other houses on that right-hand spur of Crest Drive, where the Kiss house would be in the foreground. The Wilhelm house right across the street. And the Kohlers and the Hubs and the Jenkins. And Jim Baps, none of the houses are there. Nice view of the East Road Bear Dune over there. These are all taken from the same spot up at the clubhouse. See Crest Drive right below, and then you see East Road coming off from the right of the picture. We're looking all the way to Valparaiso. And the house that we're looking at straight ahead is the Ed Howe's house up on Lupin Lane. This is in 1949, and this is the cement plant. They built this on what was then the Crumpacker property back in 1937. And this is the cement plant after the fire. In 1950, from the now Arshad house at the end of Crest Drive. And it's looking at the now Phelps house at the top of the hill. Previously the Ganilkas and previously the Proles. At the end of Beach Drive. This house was in the Better Homes and Gardens, featured in 1944. Here's a picture of Art Johnson, our marshal, taken up at the clubhouse front door in, I believe, 1952. 1950. This is Margaret Doyle's house, being built in 1937 using the Studebaker cement blocks and brand new logs. On the left is the original Bee House on East Road. Then it was Torzinski's, now the Truman House. Next to it is the Kelly House. I don't know who owns it now, and then Madge Kohler to the right. Nothing was there at the time. This was in 1929. On the right is Barbara Bennett's house down on the beach, right next to East Beach. This picture was taken right after the 1929 storm, which washed out the harbor. Just talked to Dave Milasevich. The right post is rotten and needs to be replaced. Here it's brand new. This is 1998.